Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Quran for Ramadan. Today we are going to read a complete surah, and this is a surah that you all and we all actually know by heart. It is Surah Fatihah, read in almost every rakat of the prayer, and therefore this is one surah that every single Muslim has committed to his memory or her memory. This surah, if you realize, is a beautiful supplication. It's a beautiful dua before the Almighty. And it has been actually regarded to be the first revelation of the Quran. People erroneously believe that the first verses revealed to the Prophet were Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq. Uh, in its own right, we have discussed them elsewhere and shown how this narrative is not true. And if anything else has the prerogative of being regarding as the first surah of the Quran, it is actually the Surah Fatiha. So this is the very first surah, and it is the call of a person who was standing in the times of Prophet Muhammad. Remember those times in which he was about to come before the Quraysh as the final messenger of God. His predecessors were the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. They had, in various forms, they had distorted the guidance of the Almighty and lost parts of it. It did not exist in its original form. And people of the Ishmaelites also, who were the progeny of Abraham, they too were obviously being followers of Ishmael. They had oral tradition with them of the practices of Ishmael, but they too, for a very long period of time, did not have any messenger in their lineage. So it is standing at these crossroads when guidance was something that was eluding people of Arabia, both the idolaters and the people of the book had lost it, that the call of a righteous heart actually brought this before people that, well, now that the people of the book, who were the guiders, who were the guides of mankind, they have lost their way. We need a fresh guidance. So basically, if you look at this prayer, as we will see in detail, it is basically a dua, a supplication for fresh guidance. And the way it has come at the very beginning of the Quran and placed there as well shows that how when it says Ihdina Siratul Mustaqim, O God, show us the right path. The very next surah and all the other surahs right up to Surah Nas, they are a response to this prayer for guidance. It is as if the rest of the Quran is revealed in response to this prayer of guidance. So the importance of this surah is so much that if you reflect, you'll find out that perhaps it is the most beautiful, the most grand, the most eloquent prayer that you can find in the whole of the Quran. And very similar words you'll find in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and the Psalms as well, which actually show that the way these words are articulated here, they also existed in the previous scriptures in slightly different variations, and perhaps all of them were also part of the prayers of those times. So let us take a more deeper look at every single verse of the surah. The surah, as you all know, comprises 6 verses. The words are Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Gratitude is for God only, the Lord of the universe, the most gracious, the ever merciful, who is the master of the day of judgment. Lord, you alone we worship, and only your help we seek. Bestow on us the guidance of the straight path, the path of those you have blessed, who have neither earned your wrath nor have gone astray. So, the very first verse, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, this is something which makes us drench with gratitude for the Almighty, because when people see how this universe has been created, how the elements of nature look after people, and how one's own extended family and other human beings around us, they take care of us and they show affection to us, it looks as if everything that has been created around us has been created so that we are able to benefit from it. Starting off with our own eyes, which is one of the biggest gifts that we can imagine, is our own eyes, and we take them for granted, viewers, because we open them without any problem, and we see the way we see without realizing that there are people who are without them, they are blind, and of course there are others as well who have other handicaps. But this is the starting point of our gratitude, that when we wake up in the morning, we are able to breathe, we are able to see, we are able to start a new day which has now fresh opportunities to offer us. So the very word which comes to our lips should be Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, which means that gratitude be to God, who is the Lord of the worlds, who is the Lord of the universe. So this word Alhamd is generally translated as praise be to God, which is not an accurate translation. The correct translation at this instance is gratitude be to God. Alhamd actually means to show gratitude, to express gratefulness to the Almighty. And obviously, as I just pointed out, this is the expression that comes to our lips. These are the words that come to our lips as soon as we are able to see the world around us taking care of us. The elements of nature, all of these elements we can see. I mean, they don't have any other service for their own selves. The wind does not blow for its own self. The sun doesn't shine for its own self. The moon does not light up the nights for its own self. So if you look at all these elements of nature, they are serving human beings in their own capacity. And not only that, we find that the Almighty is also taking care of us. He listens to our prayers. We find a lot of time that our prayers are being answered. We also see that there are so many happy occasions in our life. Yes, we might be passing through some straitened circumstances, but this was not the case for all times. In the past, we have had good fortunes as well. So this gives us that huge feeling that there is someone who is looking after us, and we might not be able to see us, but we have that affinity for that being in our own intuition. So the existence of God is something that we find in our own intuition. We don't need any proof, any external proof, other than the fact that we feel that we are created and someone has created us. And not only created us, he is looking after us in such a magnanimous way, in such a bountiful way, in such a gracious way. And the acknowledgement of this is Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Uh, Gratitude be to God, who is the Lord of the worlds. Just a word here about the word Alameen. It is, of course, plural, Alameen. The word singular is Alam. So it should not be any cause of confusion that this verse is referring to several worlds. In the Arabic language, plural also come to express the vastness of something. So the word Alameen is just referring to the vastness of this universe. And so if it is translated as gratitude be to God, who is the Lord of this vast universe, this would be a very accurate translation. The next thing which is mentioned is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman, the most gracious, Ar-Rahim, the ever merciful. Both these words are from the same root, which is Rahim. But there is a significant difference between the two. Rahman means someone who has this fountain gushing out of mercy from himself. So something which has this expression of vibrancy in it. So when Rahim, or when mercy has that vibrancy, it is called Rahman. That the person who has that vibrant mercy is called Rahman. And when there is that perpetual nature of mercy to be expressed, then we use the word Rahim. So in other words, Rahman and Rahim, they complement one another. And normally, when something is has that expression of gushing out, expression of ebullience, expression of vibrancy, it does seem that it will go away, because when things are so expressive, we do feel that, well, they might not last long. But the word Rahim actually dispels this and says that, well, if he's Rahman, then his mercy is not going to just die away. He's Rahim also, which means that he is going to be consistent in that. He's going to stay merciful as well. So these two words, they are not to be taken as synonyms or they are similar words. They have, in fact, these distinct meanings. Maliki Yawmiddin is the next verse, which means master of the day of judgment. Again, this is something that all of us know, that as far as we are concerned, our own conscience, the way this world is made, the way we find imperfections around us, it beckons us to believe that there is another world after this, in which justice, perfect justice, will manifest itself. This world is a place of imperfect, or maybe a better word would be possible justice. So, and that possible justice is also at times compromised, and we never get that perfect justice. People who do good deeds, they are not necessarily rewarded. People who are evil, they are not necessarily punished. In fact, people who are evil, they at times climb to the top of the ladder in a society. And we see so many inconsistencies, we see so many oppressions and injustices and persecution being suffered in this world. So the Quran has told us that basically this world is a place of trial and test. It is to test us, our metal, that the Almighty has created this world. He is actually choosing people for the hereafter, for His paradise, and He wants to see that who would pass that test. And therefore, in this world, He does not pass that judgment in a way that everyone is necessarily punished for his bad deeds or rewarded for good deeds. But He has left this justice and this judgment to the hereafter, wherein every single deed will be brought to the fore. Of course, He will be forgiving also. Many deeds will not be found in our account of register because of the fact that they would have been deleted there. But at the same time, whatever would remain, as the Quran has said elsewhere, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرٍ يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. Whatever very small good or bad deed you might have done, it might be the size of a small bit, that it is going to bound to come before you, and people are going to be judged on the basis of what they did in this world. No one is going to intercede for others. Even the closest of relatives would be thinking of their own selves. Every person will be ransomed through his own deeds or her own deeds. No one is going to save anyone. And so this day of judgment is the day that we are all waiting for, because all the compensations that we require for the injustices that we are suffering are going to be provided on that day of judgment. So if you see and make a mental note that these three verses, the first three introductory verses, they are basically expressing the attributes of God and how we relate to those attributes. So the Almighty is someone who is looking after us. So our first relationship is that of gratitude. We know that His mercy abounds and His mercy is perpetual. Therefore, He is the Rahman Rahim. We know that His justice is perfect. So therefore, He is Maliki Yawmiddin. So our first three verses are a beautiful expression, a beautiful introduction to these attributes and how we relate to these attributes. Until now, if you note, God has not been addressed as yet. We have started off this dua, we have started off this application, but we have just enumerated His attributes. It is in the fourth verse that He is addressed for the first time by the words, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Lord, You alone we worship and only Your help we seek. So now it's a direct, the indirect sequence becomes now direct. Something which was mentioned in an indirect way is now mentioned in a very direct way. And the first thing which is mentioned is Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Because You are the master of the day of judgment, because You are gracious to us, because Your mercy abounds, and because Your mercy is perpetual, so therefore You, O Lord, is the one who we worship, and from You alone we seek help. There's no one else that we go to for our help. You are our sole savior. You are the only being who can help us in our times of need. So we will not go to anyone. We will not knock the door of any person or anyone else, except that we will first call upon You. And the words again are simple and beautiful. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. And look at what we will ask You for as the foremost thing, as the thing that we cherish most. And that is expressed in the very next verse, Ihdina siratal mustaqim, that bestow on us the guidance of the straight path. So once again, refresh in your minds that this is the prayer that was being uttered in the times of the Prophet, when the first revelation, as the first revelation, it is as if God is being invoked, He's being beseeched, that the Jews and the Christians and the idolaters have lost that divine guidance, and now we are in need of that fresh guidance. So therefore, Ihdina siratal mustaqim, that please bestow us that fresh guidance, give us that fresh guidance, and make us follow that fresh guidance, which of course is referred to as Siratul Mustaqim, or the straight path. The Quran calls this guidance as straight path, and then it clarifies that as far as this path is concerned, it is the path of those people who the Almighty has blessed. So Siratul Lazina an'amta alayhim, they are the people who You have blessed, and they are not the people who have earned His wrath or have gone astray. And if you look at the usage of the Quran, dear viewers, you will realize that the word Maghdub alayhim are specially spoken of the Jews in the rest of the Quran also. And they earn the wrath of the Almighty because of their rebellious nature, because of the jealousy regarding the lineage of the last Prophet. And Ulad Dhalin is actually referring to the Nazarenes, or to the Christians of the times of the Prophet, who had lost their way in various interpretations of religion. And foremost among them, of course, was they had been incriminated with such creeds as Trinity and, of course, atonement. There are other philosophies else also had incriminated them and contaminated the pure teachings of Jesus. So these two words are specifically referring to the Jews and Christians, and it is as if a person standing in the time of the prophet is signaling to the Almighty, is waiting and impatiently for the Almighty's guidance, and that guidance is something it is being requested should be the one that is given to those who are blessed, and not should the Almighty should not provide them with anything which might earn their wrath, which means that people should not in any way follow the path of the Jews and Christians of those times who had gone astray. So, with these words, we come to an end to this. This is a beautiful surah. It's a surah that we read in every rakat of our prayer. It is a surah that we have learned by heart. But at times, unfortunately, when we are reading a surah, we are not very aware of its meaning. So it is all the more befitting, all the more needed that not only do we know the meanings of the verses, these are very short 6 verses, but we also know what they stand for and how they are actually providing us with that spiritual fodder in the form of the rest of the Quran. So placing this surah as the first surah, as I said earlier on, is like saying that this is the opening of the Quran. It is expressing that yearning for fresh guidance, and the rest of the Quran is actually that fresh guidance revealed in response to this beautiful prayer. So we can now move on to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a very beautiful elaboration of the Surah Fatihah. Our first question is coming from Rafia Khwaja. Please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Dr. Shehzad, yours was very interesting today, but I want to go back to your lecture of yesterday. I wanted to ask you a question that would you agree that in the Muslim world, this permission for 4 wives is totally misused? I've seen many people who have perfectly good wives, but would just go and marry again because they meet a young woman. It's in the Arab world, it's in our part of the world, and sometimes it happens in your own family. So aren't we misusing God's blessings, and how do we explain this?
I think this issue can be resolved if ever a person has to marry a second wife, if it is by the consent of the first wife, there should not be any problem, I think. The problem arises when a person marries a second or a third wife without, although this consent is not required by the Sharia, but for the sake of the peace of the house itself. If this one condition is followed, I think if a person has to marry for any reason, it could be any reason, but if the first wife permits that, so I wouldn't think that there should be any problem. And if the children are grown up as well from the first wife, if they are also confided into, they are also consulted, and they are also okay with the marriage taking place. So I don't think we have any right to object to that.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Noshaba?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, my question is like, if you have some bad habits which you need to overcome it, and you are trying your best, but you are not able to do it. So is there any other way to control that kind of habits? Like, for example, the sabr, even you take care of the verses and bring that verses in your mind, and also regarding anger, but you are not overcome of that kind of. So
I think this is a struggle that all of us go through. There are tips that can be given to you. If you write to me personally, I can send you some tips on how to improve our coefficient of patience and how to be able to control our anger. So these are tips which are basically psychological, I would say, suggestions given to human beings so that they are able to control themselves. And they have worked in many cases.
Okay, thank you, sir. I will call.
Salman Aziz, you can ask your question now.
सर ये इसकी तफसील में सूरह फातिहा की उससे पहले भी ये था कि नज़ुल इस्लाम से पहले लोग थोड़े से कुछ कंफ्यूजन के शिकार थे कि हम शायद सही राह पे हैं या नहीं हैं, और वो काबा के गिलाफ में पकड़ के बैठ जाते थे, रिवायात में आता है ये। तो ये चीज से थोड़ी सी मुझे मतलब इसकी कंफ्यूजन कॉज कर रही थी कि अगर उनको किसी में कंफ्यूजन थी तो वो तो दीन इब्राहिमी पे मान रहे थे और नमाज ही पढ़ते थे, उम्रे भी करते थे, और ऐसे लोग अगर थे ज्यादा तो फिर इस्लाम के दुनिया में आने के बाद जो है उनको फौरन तादाद बड़ी होनी चाहिए थी इसके ऊपर जो कि इस्लाम ले आते। और तीसरी बात सर ये है कि इसमें यानी ये कंफ्यूजन को कहां पर किस चीज पे थे ये कंफ्यूज होते थे कि वो सही चीज नहीं फॉलो करते?
دیکھیں جو ان کو روایت ملی تھی نا دین ابراہیمی کی، وہ مجمل روایت تھی، یعنی وہ مجمل کا مطلب ہے اتنی بہت زیادہ کنسائز تھی اور اس میں اجمال تھا. تو جیسا ہوتا ہے نا کہ آپ تفصیل چاہ رہے ہوتے ہیں، تو ان تفصیلات کا ہم سب کے اندر پیاس ہوتی ہے. ہم کہتے ہیں ٹھیک ہے اجمالی طور پہ تو ہم اپنے ضمیر کو فالو کر رہے ہیں، ہم ایک خدا کو مان رہے ہیں، لیکن اس سے ہماری تسلی نہیں بعض دفعہ ہو پاتی. خاص طور سے اس لیے نہیں ہو پاتی کہ جب آپ اس سرزمین میں رہ رہے ہوں جہاں پہ یہود و نصارہ تھے، جن کے پاس اللہ تعالیٰ کی گائیڈنس موجود تھی، اور وہ اصل کتابیں انہوں نے گم کر دی تھیں یا ان کی زبان ضائع ہو گئی تھی، اور بہت سارے جو پریکٹسز تھیں اس میں ڈسٹورشن آ گئی تھی. تو یہ ایک پیاس، ایک فطری پیاس تھی. پھر یہ بھی معلوم تھا کیونکہ ان کی دوستیاں تھیں آپس میں کہ یہود و نصارہ کی کتابوں کے اندر یہ لکھا ہوا تھا کہ آخری پیغمبر نے آنا ہے، عرب میں آنا ہے. تو وہ اس کے بارے میں منتظر تھے کہ ایک پیغمبر نے آنا ہے. اور اس کے نتیجے میں وہ جو ایک ہوتی ہے نا انگزائٹی، ذرا بڑھ جاتی ہے جب آپ ایکسپیکٹ کر رہے ہو کہ کسی نے آنا ہے. پھر مزید یہ ہے کہ جو یہود و نصارہ کے ساتھ ان کی جو انٹریکشن تھی، اس سے ان کو یہ بھی معلوم تھا کہ جو یہ پیغمبر ہیں ان کی کیا صفات ہوں گی، وہ جب آئیں گے تو کیا ہوگا. اور قرآن مجید نے اس کو آؤٹ لائن کیا ہے سورہ نساء میں اور سورہ مائدہ میں بھی کہ جب وہ آخری پیغمبر آئے تو جو رائٹیس امنگ دا پیپل آف دا بک تھے، جو لوگ انتظار کر رہے تھے، وہ پھر ایمان لے کے آئے. اور یہ زیادہ تر وہ تھے کہ جو پطرس کے فالوورز تھے، حضرت مسیح کے جو خلیفہ راشد ہیں، جن کو ہم سائمن پیٹر یا پطرس کہتے ہیں، شمون بھی کہتے ہیں ان کو. تو ان کے جو فالوورز ہیں وہ زیادہ تر عرب میں آئے ہیں، اور وہ آئے ہیں اور اس کے ساتھ آئے ہیں کہ آخری پیغمبر نے یہاں آنا ہے. تو وہ جب آئے ہیں تو وہ لوگ ایمان بھی لے کے آئے ہیں. تو اصل میں ایک امید کی فضا موجود تھی، اور دوسرا جیسے میں نے عرض کیا کہ اجمال تھا ان گائیڈنس چیزوں کے بارے میں کہ جو پہلے سے موجود تھی، جس کے نتیجے میں ایک فطری طور پہ یہ خواہش پیدا ہوئی کہ بھئی اگر وہ پیغمبر نے آنا ہے تو ہماری زندگیوں میں وہ آئے.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Mansoor Ahmed, please ask your question now.
Sir, what is reality with the tabir of Saba Masani related to Surah Fatihah?
The word Saba Masani, first of all, we have to understand, has been used in a hadith, and which actually refers to the whole of the Quran. And the word Saba Masani is referring to the 7 chapters of the Quran that I have explained elsewhere in some of my lectures. So Surah Fatiha is generally considered to be Saba Masani, not in the sense that it has 7 verses or 7 oft-repeated verses as is the general interpretation. Basically, Surah Fatiha is like a summary of the whole Quran, and that is why the hadith says regarding Surah Fatiha, Hiya Sabal Masani wa Hiya Quran al-Azim, that these are the 7 chapters of the Quran, of course, which means the Quran itself, and this is the great Quran. So Sabal Masani, or Sabal Masani as the verse says, is referring to the Quran itself. And in the Quran itself, we do also find another reference in Surah Hijr, I think. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِي is the words, which means that we have given you 7 chapters, which such that each of these chapters consists of surahs which are found in pairs. So that is another reference which is found in the Quran. Other than that, as I said, generally the word Sabam al-Masani is regarded, the Surah Fatiha is regarded to be the connotation of this, not because it is the summary of the Quran as I just explained, but because they think that it consists of 7 verses which are often repeated. And al-Masani is generally translated as something which is repeated, whereas this is not the case. The word Masani is the plural of Masna, and Masna means something which occurs in pairs. So basically, it is a reference to the 7 chapters of the Quran or the 7 groups of the Quran in which the surahs occur in pairs.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Sir Faraz Nemat, you may ask your question now.
السلام علیکم ڈاکٹر صاحب. یہ جو سورہ فاتح کے اندر جو ہم پڑھتے ہیں اس میں عمومی طور پہ جو کانٹیکٹ کے حساب سے یہ صرف بیان کر دیا جاتا ہے کہ یہ یہود و نصارہ کے لیے ہے، جن کو مغضوب علیہم والضالین ہم جو پڑھتے ہیں. تو یہ تو اب آج کے زمانے میں تو ظاہر ہے کہ ہم اسی سورہ فاتح کو پڑھتے ہیں، تو آج کے زمانے میں بھی تو ایسے لوگ ہوں گے جن کو کہ ہم اس کیٹیگری میں لے کے آ سکتے ہیں. تو کیا ہم یہ بات نہیں کہہ سکتے کہ آج جو لوگ ہیں اس وقت دنیا میں، تو وہ ان کا کریکٹر اگر یہودیوں اور اس وقت کے یہودی اور انسان جو نصارہ تھے ان کی طرح کا کریکٹر ہوگا تو وہ لوگ سارے اسی طرح سے مغضوب علیہم والضالین میں شمار کیے جائیں گے؟
اصل میں جو یہودیوں کا جو غضب والا معاملہ ہے نا، یہ اللہ تعالیٰ کا خاص غضب ہے، یہ کوئی عام غضب نہیں ہے. یہ وہ غضب ہے جس کے تحت قیامت تک وہ عیسائیوں کے تحت رکھے جائیں گے، قیامت تک ان کو ایک جگہ پہ بسایا جائے گا، پھر وہاں سے نکالا جائے گا، پھر ایک نئی جگہ پہ وہ آباد ہوں گے. تو یہ ایک پورا تسلسل ہے جو بنی اسرائیل، بنو ابراہیم کی جو اس شاخ کے ساتھ हुआ जिसके अंदर 2000 साल तक नबी आते रहे। तो ये यहाँ पे तो इसकी खास कॉनोटेशन है, यानी एक ये ऐसा गजब है कि जो आप ये अनपैरेलल्ड है इस लिहाज से कि किसी और कौम पे जो भी गजब हुआ वो हुए होंगे, लेकिन यहाँ असल में मुराद वो यहूद हैं कि जिनके साथ ये मामला आज भी जारी है। आज भी आप देखिए कि इसराइल में वो इकट्ठे हैं, और कुछ अर्सा पहले हिटलर ने जो उनके साथ मामला किया वो उसी का शाखसाना था कि अल्लाह ताला ने कहा था कि इनको हर थोड़ी देर के बाद एक जगह पे मार पड़ेगी, फिर ये एक और नई जगह पे जमा होंगे, फिर वहां से वो मारे जाएंगे। तो क़यामत तक इनका ये मामला चलता रहेगा कि वो एक जगह से दूसरी जगह पे खुदेड़े जाएंगे और फिर कहीं और जमा होंगे, फिर वहां से निकाले जाएंगे। तो ये एक बहुत गैर मामूली मामला है कि जो बनु इब्राहिम के साथ हुआ है, इशारा उसकी तरफ है ये।
तो डॉक्टर साहब ये जो फिर इसमें बड़ा डिस्प्यूट रहता है कि इनाम याफ्ता लोग कौन है इसमें। यहाँ पर जब हम पढ़ते हैं सिरातल लजीना अनअमत अलैहिम, तो अब वो वहां पे कुछ लोग सूरह निसा की आयत नंबर 69 को कोट करते हैं कि ये जो जिन्होंने इताअत की अल्लाह की और रसूल की उनको उसके दर्जे मिलेंगे अंबिया के, शोहदा के, सादकीन के, सालिहीन के, और क्या ही अच्छी रफाकत है। ये वाली आयत वो कोट करते हैं, जबकि फिर हम जो देखते हैं कि सूरह आराफ की आयत नंबर 30 से 31 है, 30-31, और इसी तरह सूरह अल-अनाम की आयत नंबर 150 से 153 तक है। तो 153 में अल्लाह ताला कहता है कि हाज़ा सिरातुल मुस्तकीम, यही सिरातुल मुस्तकीम है जो पिछले उसमें बयान किया गया। तो हम फिर किस चीज को इसमें फिर
नहीं, वो
डिस्प्यूट?
देखिए वो तो सूरह निसा आपने जहाँ पे पॉइंट आउट किया ना वर्स 69, वो तो क्लियरली ये बता रही है ना कि फउलाइका मअल्लज़ीना अनअमल्लाहु अलैहिम। वहां तो अल्फाज ही यही आ गए हैं कि जो सूरह फातिहा की तरफ रेफर कर रहे हैं कि ये वो लोग हैं जिन पे इनाम किए गए हैं, और फिर बताया गया है कि वो सालिहीन व सिद्दीकीन और फिर हसुना उलाइका रफीका के अल्फाज आए हैं कि बेहतरीन रफाकत उनको मैसर होगी। तो ये तो वर्ड्स इतनी क्लियर है कि यहाँ असल में ये रेफरेंस इन लोगों की तरफ है। वो सूरह आराफ की जो आयतें हैं वो दूसरी हैं, वो तो एक अमूमी तौर पे बात बयान कर रही हैं कि ये सीधी राह है। ये सूरह निसा की जो आपने वर्स का इशारा किया 59 या 69, ये एग्जैक्टली ये बता रही है कि इनाम याफ्ता लोग कौन है।
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. We have a question in the chat. Are we right in classifying Islam as a discipline? If so, isn't the practice of discipline, gratitude, and patience an antidote to anxiety and depression? Hence, does the correct practice of Islam combat the modern day menaces of many issues now termed as mental health?
I think this goes hand in hand. It's like saying that at times, if you look at some of the modern developments in science, which also in psychotherapy, in psychology, the advice given by many psychotherapists is to look towards the blessing that we have and the gratitude that we should express. Again, it might come from a secular source, but the thing is that it is a reality in itself, that the favor that we enjoy. The only difference is that when you relate it to a metaphysical reality or a philosophy, you will get to know that these favors and these blessings that you enjoy, and as a result of which you can find that mental peace, they have a first cause, they have a first source, and that is God Himself. So the only difference is that how far you go back to the first cause. At times, psychotherapists, they don't go back as far, but there are, of course, the Quranic implications of this is that the first cause of all these things is God Himself, as far as providing these blessings are concerned. So, as I said, this will go in tandem, and it all depends how you view things.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I had a question. There are many narrations which say that praying in congregation in the mosque has several times more sawab or reward. But there is in particular a narration that I wanted to talk to you about is that the Prophet himself, I mean, according to the narration by Abu Huraira, it's Sahih Bukhari. It says that the narration it says that the Prophet said that I would go behind and burn the houses of men who did not present themselves for the compulsory congregation. The image or the Prophet, we have learned, he's very kind and very merciful. And this is a very harsh or a strict statement in this thing. So I wanted to know about it.
So you see, this is a very specific narrative which speaks of a very specific situation, and it was in the times of the Prophet when the truth had been unveiled to the hypocrites and to the disbelievers in its ultimate way, and they were still posing amongst Muslims that this directive was given. These were hypocrites who would not come to the mosque. They were hypocrites who would pose to be, they would be like snakes in our own ranks. So it was to expose them that the Prophet said that, well, if you hear the azan, you have to come to the mosque. If you don't come to the mosque, that I feel like burning your houses. So it was directed towards those hypocrites, and it was directed toward those people who were trying to harm Islam by being part of it, whereas of course they were not part of it. And this was a time in Medina when that exposure had to be needed. It was a time in which the Itmam al-Hujjah, or the unveiling of the truth in its ultimate form, had taken place, and now these people needed to be exposed. So one way of exposing them was to make them realize that they should come to the mosque, because we also know from the Quran that these hypocrites they would dilly dally in praying, and it would be the most difficult thing for them to come to the mosque. So basically, this particular hadith that you have referred to is just referring to those people. It's not a general narrative, and as you have rightly said, the kindness that the Prophet has and the affection that he shows, it does not go in any way. It does not harmonize with that. So the reason being, as I said, it relates to a very specific situation. It cannot be cited out of that context for any other situation. For the rest of the situations, the narrative is the same that you just also previously pointed out. That praying in congregation is a big it's a big boon. It'll earn you reward, but if you don't do so, that's not an obligation.
So we know that Allah had told the Prophet particularly who were the hypocrites. So he know that this person is a hypocrite. So he just wanted to expose it to the community.
Absolutely, to expose them to the community and make Muslims also realize that these are people who are snakes among your ranks. So you need to be careful about them.
Thank you so much. Raja Sheikh, you may ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you for such a simple translation of Surah Fatihah and such a beautiful translation. My question pertains to the vastness of Surah Fatihah. I did this course from the Man Ali Khan in which he's spent ages just describing Fatihah. And it's so majestic and it's so beautiful. And I suppose my question is, when we pray it so often, how does one retain all that in every single rak'ah? How does one keep it in their mind? How does one bring themselves to that state of meditation to understand that this surah encompasses more that we are possibly comprehending?
Well, this is like a challenge. This is like a struggle that all of us go through in every namaz and every prayer that we offer, because you see, it is the most common thing that we say in our prayers, and the more a thing is common and the more a thing is repeated, the less concentration that you have regarding that, because it kind of becomes a routine. It's a juggling of your own words that come out of your mouth rather in a mechanical way. So it is here that all of us, like a challenge, I said, we need to just stop for a while and think that, well, every rakat, whenever we are praying, we stand up before God. These grand verses, these beautiful verses, they are the best possible way to connect you to God, to earn you that strong God connection, because they are an expression of God's favors and our acknowledgement of those favors. And at the same time, they are also an expression in which we are trying to find out the guidance that we would like from the Almighty, and He is bent upon providing us with that guidance. So I think if you just keep this aura in mind, that basically it's a dua, it's a supplication in which that guidance is that we want is something that will be supplied later on in the form of the Quran, and it is an expression of our gratitude and our expression in the trust of God regarding the favors that He has given us, and at the same time also how on the day of judgment we will be rewarded with that perfect justice that eludes us in this world. So these are, if you just need to concentrate that if outside the prayer, if you keep on reflecting on Surah Fatihah, so once you are in the prayer, that outside the prayer reflection, it does help. It connects you immediately, because if you stand up in the prayer and then start reflecting, your thoughts might go here and there. But if you have prepared yourself, like for example, if you are sitting idle, you're driving a car or wherever you are, and then you imagine these topics of Surah Fatihah and keep them in mind, it will switch on themselves as soon as you stand in the prayer, because it will become part of your RAM. It will become part of your memory, which is a random access memory.
Thank you so much. That really helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Ibad, if you want to ask your question, you can unmute your mic and ask it.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. I had a follow-up question from the hadith. I also, recently a hadith suni thi jiske andar was mentioned, the Prophet punished the people who stole their camels, or the punishment was the Prophet said कि उनको I think बांध दिया जाए in the heat and probably take their eyes out and kill them slowly, right?
Gouge their eyes, yes.
Gouge their eyes out. So I've heard that this is a very authentic hadith, but given जो हमने अपने Prophet के बारे में पढ़ा again that he's very loving and he's very kind, it doesn't really make sense to me.
Actually, this
So
is the whole story is that these people had stolen those camels from the public treasury, and they had killed people while stealing them, and they had caused that nuisance. So basically, the punishment that was being given to them was that of rebellion, and this is mentioned in the Quran that such people who cause this nuisance and rebellion, they will be put to death in a merciless way. So the words of the Quran are "An yuqattalu," that you kill them in an exemplary manner. People who show this rebellion in a way that they cause this theft to the public treasury. Remember, this public treasury is meant for all the people of the state, for the poor as well, for the destitute. So they had stolen basically the assets or the thing that would ultimately would have gone to these poor people, and also were guilty of killing the people who were guarding them. So it was not just a simple act of theft. And the Quran says that all these compound acts of theft which are called robberies and which are accompanied by such killings, they have to be punished in a very exemplary way. And this is what the Prophet did actually. So remember, the mercy of the Prophet is not in any way inconsistent with the justice, the requirements of justice. This is very much what God would do. So God is very just. He will put people into paradise, but remember, He'll also burn them in hell. And that is not inconsistent with His mercy.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Mansoor Ahmed, please briefly ask your question.
Sir, in a lecture, I recall Ustad Javed Ghamidi said Surah Fatihah is kind of common between other prophets as well, and they used to recite it. Can we see them in Bible or anyone else?
Yes, I think when I was teaching Surah Fatihah, you might find references in some of my previous lectures that, and also you'll find this in Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi's Fatihah Nizam al-Quran. If you look up his tafsir, you'll find that he has given us the Fatihah that was found in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and in the Psalms of David. So he's actually demarcated that from their own scriptures.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We will be concluding our session over here. Thank you all for joining and participating. Thank you for an enlightening session. And until tomorrow, see you all. Have a great rest of the day. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.